Now let's talk with Jean Manning. Jean, thank you so much for joining us today. That was a wonderful message you shared. And I'd love to begin by kind of unpacking this theme of radical hospitality a little bit. It seems so important in any faith community, but how have you seen this in the communities that you've served? And I'd love for Sherre to share her experience with this as well.
Certainly. It all began, I think, for me in terms of realizing that that's a message that God calls all of us to proclaim, in that as we welcome the stranger into our midst, we are welcoming God, in a sense, into our midst. And everyone's story is part of God's ongoing story. The Bible, the canons of the Scripture ended with the book of Revelation in my tradition, but God's revelation to us through other people continues on. And so when we invite the stranger in, I believe we're inviting God into our midst.
It's a very Jewish notion, because we were once strangers in the land, and thus we should treat everyone as if they're us, right?
Correct.
Because we're strangers. I loved your story, especially because in the Jewish tradition, for 7 days following a wedding, there's parties. Literally 7 days of parties. You would not believe it. It's like we just can't stop celebrating.
Right.
And you're actually obligated to invite strangers to the parties. And every time I invite non-Jews or friends that don't know the host, they're like, Sherre, that's not social etiquette.
Right,
I can't do that.
Exactly.
But it's such a powerful message, because really we're dwelling in God's home. And when we do that, we're opening ourselves up to so much. Tell us more about that trip.
It was an amazing experience, and for one who tends to like to follow proper etiquette, I was totally turned upside down, as I mentioned in my message. The radical hospitality of the folks there, the way they greeted us, invited us in, made us honored guests, which, as I say, it was not a matter of humility that kept me from wanting to do that. It was simply pride of, I'm not supposed to be here. And I must say, the first time I came back to the States and performed a wedding, I thought to myself, well, shall we go outside and invite everybody in, and realize that's not our custom in our tradition, but it should be, because that is the gospel message, that all people are to come. So that trip to South Africa opened my eyes to a broader sense of God's abundance and hospitality.
And I wonder if you think this, Daniel, but I love the idea that also you were thinking, what am I wearing? I mean,
absolutely.
I don't know quite as much, but you know what resonates for me is just the intentionality of hospitality in faith communities. I've been so blessed to be a part of Catholic communities who have recognized that this is crucial to the vitality of the experience for people. And it's not just having good music or a good sermon or a homily or what have you. It's really embedded in the people in the church and the leadership and in the values, and how everyone interacts with each other, but also welcomes people that are brand new.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, in my particular congregation, we try to bring that message each Sunday morning, to please come and be part of this community of faith. And I hope that our actions and our words match. I think that's what struck me on this trip to South Africa. The words and the actions worked perfectly together.
What have you learned most from a stranger in your midst, whether at the grocery store or your pulpit?
Oh, yeah.
Anyone in particular?
Sure. When you say that, I think of a lady who walks the streets back home in Nashville, and got to know her through a series of situations, and realized that there is no difference in the human being. We're all created in the image of God, and our stories play out differently for each of us, but yet at the same time we're all God's children, and hence the reason for radical hospitality.
That would be a great billboard.
Yes.
We're all God's children. We all have had the same, just a different journey.
That's right, that's right. And some journeys are painful and sorrowful. We all have pain and sorrow, but some are more painful and sorrowful. Some have more joy. But we meet where we are all made in God's image.
It reminds me a little bit of kind of a controversial issue that's playing out in the country right now, and that's around immigration. But this welcoming the stranger is really central to this. And I wonder, for you, Jean, in the South, and for you, Sherre, in California, in Los Angeles, there's, having lived there,
issues with immigration.
Yes.
How do you feel this connects to both of your faith traditions to speak to this particular issue, I guess?
Sure. We say in my tradition that the gospel is radical, and if we lived into the radical nature of the gospel, things would look the kingdom would be here, and we would recognize. We are told through Scripture to welcome the alien, the stranger, the widow, and And aside of what may be happening in the political world, our call, I believe, of people of faith is to honor and respect every human being. And how we do that is to honor them and welcome them.
But why is that so hard for people, Jean? I mean, it seems like a simple message. Let's just do it, right? Why is that so challenging? Why do we look at the other and say, you're different from me?
Exactly. It's got to, I believe, have something to do with our own sense of protection. And I think when we open ourselves to others, we become vulnerable. Certainly, in my experience of walking into that wedding, into that home, I was uncomfortable and vulnerable because I didn't feel I was off balance. But yet, at the same time, I was being given God's grace and abundance. And why that threw me off is a question we will be asking, I guess, till the end of time. Fear, and that's a whole nother topic, but I think sometimes we're afraid of those we don't know, and we don't know their story.
Well, and Sherry, don't you think part of it is just everyday experience too? I mean, living in Los Angeles, there's a huge Latino population in that country. I mean, pardon me, in the city.
Yeah, I like that Los Angeles.
Yeah. No, in the city, I mean, and I don't know people that don't live there understand that 60% of the school district is made up of Latino children. You know, I mean, it's a different day-to-day experience with an immigrant population that you may not have in other parts of the country.
Right, and life has very much changed. I mean, safety issues and safety concerns, and there's always this apprehension first and foremost. But it reminded me, there's a holiday in October in the Jewish tradition called Sukkot, and you put up these huts, literally, these makeshift huts, and you invite strangers into your home.
Yes.
And this year we did it, as we do every year, and my kids are like, do you know anything about him? Do you know anything? And it was like we were crazy people. I mean, every visitor that we did know was questioning us because there is that apprehension, and that is, it could be dangerous, as opposed to this person could change my perspective. And change how I think and how I see things.
Absolutely.
Now, Jean, Sherry and I both noticed that you just got your doctorate in 2010, so we'd love to hear a little bit about your personal faith journey. We've got about a minute left of how you arrived at wanting to pursue that and how you're serving now. So.
It actually started in South Africa with another woman that I met who turned my world upside down because her husband had been imprisoned with Nelson Mandela only because of the color of her skin. And she spoke of love and grace, and there wasn't an element of anger in her. And suddenly, when I heard her story, I said, preaching has got to be about sharing that love and that grace, and by listening to other people's stories and realizing they are part of God's ongoing story. And so I came back and said, I need to do some more work so that I can proclaim that message in a more fruitful way.
That is a fantastic story.
Beautiful.
We're so grateful that you shared it with us, and we're so grateful you've joined us on the show today.
Thank you.
Welcome back
Glad to
anytime.
be here.
Thank you.